Well, good morning. This is Morning at NTV. The hashtag is just that, Morning at NTV, so you can actually take part in these conversations. We're talking about, well, just before the break, the Karuma project, and we're being, told, how far and all the benefits of it. But what about policies? I mean, energy policies, and who's checking to see if they're influencing for the better these people who are poor and vulnerable? I know just in Uganda, and my guest is saying that we could stand corrected depending on who you're asking, access to electricity is at 26% as of last year. But he said if you're asking a politician in his favor, he might say 32%. But let's just go with 26% as for the World Bank. I have from the Africa Institute for Energy Governance, the CEO of Afiego, that is Dickens Kamsha. Good morning.
Yeah, thank you, Flavia.
Yes.
And good morning, viewers.
So depending on who we ask, that 26% can change.
That's very true, because most of our developments, we are driving them politically. And because our politics is really mainly about gambling, so you will know, the politician will tell you, not necessarily on the basis of research, but just will tell you what he thinks can please the people out there.
He sees lights and he says
Yes.
everyone is powered.
Yes. If you take power to a district, you would say actually now all the districts of Uganda are connected. But what does it mean?
I actually want to ask that because the president said that every district, apart from two,
You see,
have access.
That's
But
why
what does that actually
That's
mean?
why we have very big problems.
Yes.
Because today you will hear that actually we have debts, over 10 billion US dollars in debts. So if you've borrowed the money,
Actually, a big chunk of our
Yes.
budget is for debt repayment.
yes, right
Yes.
now it is over 10 trillion
Yes.
for debt repayment. So if you borrow that money, put it in electricity to build, say, Bujagari, and you put more money to build a transmission line to Chisoro, to Arua, and when you get satisfied that actually there is a transmission line to Arua. But in actual sense, what does it mean? Does it mean that actually people of Arua have electricity?
Because that's our main question, access to electricity.
Yes.
Am I powered?
Yes, actually, it is not even access, because people have gone far much. They have gone beyond access, because access is useless. Most of Ugandans actually, they put power. Right now, the World Bank is actually planning to give us around 50 million US dollars to connect people for free. Reason is that they have no capacity to pay for power. So assuming they connect you for free, and you don't have money to pay for that power. So the companies like Umeme, like the government will be saying, we have 1 million connections in the country.
Yes.
But if you go on the ground to ask actually whether those people who are connected are using the power, you actually find actually it is opposite.
Okay.
Even me and you, if they asked you if you have your energy needs, what percentage do you actually use electricity to serve those energy needs? You find you don't cook on that power, you don't boil water on that power. I have gone to many up-country towns. You find these tailors who are doing tailoring business in the towns. They actually have these charcoal flat irons.
Yes.
You ask them why are they not using power. They tell you if we are to use this power, the next day would actually be closed, because this power is impossible to use. So at the end of the day, access is good.
Isn't this where everyone charges at one center in a village, and some people can use the power here, some people can use the power here. Even in your home, you can't use certain rooms don't have the power because of access. So we're not asking question, we're asking consumption.
Yes. Because what we need to be looking at is actually affordability.
Okay.
Because most of the government officials will tell you that before you talk about affordability, you must talk about access first.
Okay.
But yes, how many years are we going to be talking about access?
Because Dickens, I also thought we were talking about access, to be honest.
Yes, you see, since 2000, we've built, we upgraded the Owen Falls Dam from 60 megawatts to 180 megawatts. We built Chira Dam for a capacity of 200 megawatts. We've built Bujagari for 250 megawatts. We are now building Karuma and Isimba for 783 megawatts. We've built around 40 mini grids with the capacity of around 200 megawatts. And in all those projects, we've invested over 5 billion US dollars. So if we've invested all that money, and we know now we have how many institutions in the electricity sector, I wish you can, if you count, Uganda Electricity Generation, Uganda Electricity Transmission,
Yes.
Uganda Electricity Distribution, we have Electricity
ERA.
Regulatory Authority.
Yes.
We have Rural Electrification Agency.
You eat TCL as well. There's
Yes.
plenty.
We have now this committee headed by Mr. Engineer Chigundu, called that it is overseer of the Karuma and the Simba, a man who was formed by our Supreme Court that actually for 2 times he had failed to organize elections that were free and fair, that were in line with the Constitution.
We put
Is
him
the
in
one-
energy.
is the one supposed to oversee whether the 2 dams are going to work for people
Yes.
or not. So we've invested huge amounts of money, and we cannot just continue talking about access. If you want to understand that actual access will not help you, look at how many stores have closed in Uganda. The Nakumates, the Uchumis, you look at, if you look at even these banks, they will tell you they use a huge amounts of money. So even the government has not actually taken the initiative to actually understand what is the cost, what is the contribution of the cost of electricity on these businesses. Why are most businesses in Uganda actually failing in the first 2-3 years? What is the problem? So because if
yes.
access is that you've reached each and almost every district, the assumption is that access you have solved it. But
So
why is it
they
we still have
access, but they
problems?
can't. And let's talk about, for example, consuming sectors, because over the last couple of weeks for budget review, we've had different sectors come to talk to us, and that's also a bit of a problem. Energy, they're saying, electricity, the cost is high, and if you have a factory and you have to power it for different things. So, for example, consuming sectors, if we're talking about like a residential, we're talking about commercial, industrial, transport,
Yes.
should it be fine, we're off access? We're now talking about cost. Should we focus on some sectors that probably bring in money? Because I know that you speak for the poor and vulnerable, who tend to be very much ignored in this whole thing. Should it be consumption of electricity for certain sectors that eventually will drive the economy? Or should we look at everyone and anyone consuming electricity?
Yeah, I think that is a very good question. First and foremost, any country that has developed, whether it is Indonesia, whether it is Philippines, whether it is the South Korea that we are talking about, they actually design their electricity policies as a package.
Yes.
If you are extending power to Ntungam, what is this power going to do there?
Yes, yes.
How can we ensure that actually we are going to get value for money? In other words, that you extend power there, you connect people, and the people use that power. So what they do, they actually do a survey, an investigation to know what are the advantages, what are the economic opportunities for people in Ntungam. They say, Matoke.
Yes.
Do we need to continue transporting Matoke with the waste and everything on lorries to Kampala? No, we want to process them from there. And they will ensure that they mobilize people to be part of that initiative to process those Matoke using electricity. If you are taking power to Bulisa, where there is a lake and maybe your main objective is fishing, you are going to design and ensure you work with those people. So in other words, if the transmission line is going to cost you $1 million, you can actually add there $200,000 to ensure that $200,000 is actually going to help you to work with people, come up with that economic activity.
There's economic value.
Yes, so at the end of the day, power is actually supporting people to improve their lives, but most importantly, they are able to increase their economic activities to pay taxes. The problem here is that actually, at least as a FIEGO, the way we work with an organization called Overseas for Development Cooperation from UK, we're actually analyzing the rural electrification program, which is intended to help the poor of the poorest.
Okay.
And the president has been talking about saying, actually, it is not a question of just building a road. It is, we must make sure we go beyond that, we help households to increase their incomes.
Yes.
And how do you do it? So they are saying maybe electricity can help Ugandans to increase their household incomes. So what do? We've written to the World Bank that has been funding most of the rural electrification programs. We've written to the Ministry of Energy and Rural Electrification Agency. Can you do an audit to assess the value of electricity in rural communities? To understand if you invest $5 million to extend power to each of these districts, after 5 years, what do you gain there? What has been the impact on the people themselves? Rather than telling people we have connected all the districts.
We have given you electricity.
So assuming you connect out of the 100 and over 100 districts, you connect 20 districts. But you ensure there are real economic activities in those districts, that you are able to generate revenues, and those revenues help you to expand to other districts. Rather than saying, I'm just expanding. At the end of the day, so what do you gain from extending power to each and every place, you cannot go back to do studies to understand the economic relevance and the social relevance.
You've talked about, there's so many key players. We've talked about ERA, UETCL, UEDC, plenty. One of the biggest issues when it comes to maybe access to electricity, consuming sectors and all of that, or energy, is the lack of integrated power sector planning. Either there are too many people in the sector, they're not working together, they're not aligning, or they're doing sub of the next person's job. So my job is subbed into Dickens' job, and you know, we're all doing the same thing but with different titles.
I agree with you. Because right now, it's like you in your home, you have 10 guests.
Yes.
And you invite, you have around 10 kilograms of meat. Then you invite 20 people to cook for them and prepare food.
Yes.
So one is managing salt, another is managing water, another is managing fire, another one is managing plates, another one is washing the guests. So at the end of the day, you actually discover it is useless. Because you are not going to have 20 people just to deal with smaller things.
Yes.
Because right now we generate, actual generation is around 700 megawatts of power for over 36 million people. So what are all these institutions doing?
Yes.
And you see, at the end of the day, these institutions actually even don't have mandates. Even where they have mandates, they don't exercise their mandates. This is the reason why, actually, the story we were seeing on NTV just a few minutes ago, you are talking about Karuma, you are talking about Isimba. Who actually signed those agreements? Who negotiated those agreements? Who decided that actually these are the best companies that should construct those dams that are going to give you the best deal? It was the president. Because I remember even us ourselves, we petitioned the IGG, that actually the process for negotiating, for deciding which companies should construct the dams was not open, was not transparent. The IGG started investigating. And the State House wrote to the IGG saying, stop it. The president said, use Sinohydro, which was supposed to construct Isimba. Move from Isimba, go and construct Karuma. You China Water, which had given the wrong information in its bid documents, that where they were showing some capacity which they didn't have.
Yeah.
He said, move from Karuma to Isimba. 2 years down the road, we saw the two dams actually developing cracks and actually suffering. How much money have we invested in it? Here you have electricity distribution company, electricity generation company, which is in the electricity distribution generation company is in charge of generation or supervising generation.
Yes.
You have electricity transmission company in charge of building.
Then we have the regulatory.
Electricity Regulatory Authority.
Yes.
So these, you go and start constructing Karuma and Isimba. For now 3 years, after 3 years, you hear Uganda Electricity Transmission Company crying that actually they don't have land where to build transmission lines from the dams to Kawanda,
yes,
where they are going to be putting that power. So you start asking, is it because of many institutions? Are we saying if these institutions are government institutions, can't they sit in one place and work? Then all of a sudden you have a technical institution that is supposed to supervise, you terminate its contract, you bring the engineer Chugunda and his people, that they are going to supervise the other people who are doing the work. Are you sure you have assessed the technical competence of the engineer Chugunda team that is going to do work? Where is error? Because at the end of the day, if you have electricity regulatory authority that is supposed to regulate,
doesn't it have a supervisory role as well?
Yes, because yes, worldwide there is no way you can regulate something you cannot measure. And the measurement depends on how, from day one, when you decide which company comes here, under what terms and conditions it is going to build that project, or the quality of the power purchase agreements that are signed between government and companies must be assessed by the regulator to be sure that actually with my regulatory functions and mandate, I'm able to regulate this.
Definitely.
If the terms and conditions are bad, the way we've been struggling with memes that, you know, you go and commit yourself, then afterwards you want to turn around.
20 years.
Yes, you want to turn around, you are going to find it extremely difficult. But if you have the regulator who is supposed to, you assume is very technically competent and is helping you to understand all the processes. From the day you say, I want to construct this dam for these purposes, I want to create the market for that electricity, the regulator should be advising.
And
you.
the checks should be at each point. When we talk about sector planning, you can't also not mention the fact that there's a financial ecosystem. Because you've talked about money, billions and billions, and at
It's
every
huge
turn
amounts
there's
of
billions.
Money you can't even believe.
Do we trust this financial ecosystem in these sectors? Is money moving around? You know, what's happening? Aren't we going to, we've already put ourselves in debt anyway. But
No, and to be honest, Ugandans need to understand the over 10 billion US dollars, the over 10 trillions that we are supposed to be paying this year. You know, you are going to collect around 16 trillion as Uganda Revenue Authority, the ones you can collect from
within. Yes.
And out of that, you are supposed to use over 10 trillions to pay the debt. So we have to be very sure that the money we borrow is invested well. We have to be sure that actually the people who are in charge of that money, using that money, actually are transparent.
But by and large, if the money was gotten to invest in electricity, and we're saying electricity is very necessary to all the consuming sectors to eventually trickle down into the economy, it's a good thing.
Of course, there is no any country in this world, even the US has debts.
Yes.
But what matters, I think the point I had made earlier, is that how do you use that money?
Okay.
If you have a head of state, we have inspectorate of government, supposed to ensure there is transparency in the way public businesses are done. You come here at the State of the Nation address, instead of telling people, this is the money you gave me at the beginning of the year, this is how I have used the money, and I can give you statistics of what we have achieved. Instead, you come here and tell the people that actually the IGG who is supposed to help you on transparency, you don't trust the person. You've now created something small that is not defined.
The front page of the Daily Monitor, the IGG is hitting back to say thieves are hiding behind the president. I know we digress, but imagine that.
No, of course, you see, like, to be honest, sometimes we sympathize. If I worked with the government for some months with Director of Public Prosecutions, but I tell you, the people in the government, they are very competent, they have the brains, but when you are working under politicians that are very complicated, whose main objective is actually to confuse people to get votes. So I can feel
the IGG's
what
problem.
the IGG is saying. I'm very sure if it was not a president, she would be saying, I think you're the president, you need to go back and reorganize. Look at yourself in a mirror. Because I'm telling you, most of the people and most of the confusion in public businesses in Uganda, everywhere you go to do research, you end up in the State House. Because the State House is like a clearing house.
Our politics is in everything.
Yes, everything. And whether you want to create more districts, because if the IGG is going to have capacity to manage 100 districts today, and the next year they create more 20 districts, are you going to add more money to IGG to manage all those districts? So for me, I agree with her that actually the problem is not the inspectorate of government. The problem is actually the president and his government.
Let's go back to talking about electricity. I shared this with you, and you had a very passionate opinion. I said that Uganda is one of the few sub-Saharan African countries that have liberalized the energy market, and you said that's not even from us. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, of course, we know very well that, you know, these were World Bank, American policies to liberalize. And the reason they saw that in Africa, everything needed to be reconstructed. So it's where the businesses were. They knew in Africa, there was no money for the governments to invest in those parastatals. So they said, you liberalize.
And let someone come in
with money and they do work.
Invest.
And the governments in Africa were supposed to do the regulation. But you see, when the companies that were coming here, they came with the money, they came with the technical understanding. You, the regulator, you didn't have money. You were still really struggling to begin. You didn't have the technical competence. How do you regulate a person who is even more skilled than you? So in the electricity sector, we started liberalizing. We disbanded the UEB. We created the Uganda Electricity Generation, Distribution, Transmission, and those companies, you know, they are the shareholders is the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry for Privatization. They are two shareholders. They were the ones supposed to manage the process. Today, if you ask them after almost 15 years,
how far?
How far have they increased their capacity, their understanding? Instead of them actually say, let's look for skills and manage some of these small sectors that we have, like the generation, the transmission. Uganda Electricity Generation Company decided to bring ESCOM, that is managing the dam that was built in 1957, almost the Own Falls Dam. They also said the Chira that was already constructed, We can't even manage it. Let's bring someone else. You now have Bear managing Ujagari. You are going to have all these ones. So what is it that the government companies are doing? If Umeme today left the distribution, are we sure that Uganda distribution company can manage it?
But you know, speaking of Umeme leaving can't be our answer to everything, because I know people are complaining about, and you really actually work towards the poor and the vulnerable understanding this, and their complaints are the power tariffs. You know, the cost. They're saying that there might be some hidden charges. When I put my yaka versus the money I've paid, I don't understand how my units end up being a certain amount of money. But letting go of Meme, will that really be the answer?
No, it doesn't. You see, at the end of the day, we said, from the day you decide to construct a dam, to the way you negotiate the power purchase agreements, because the power purchase agreements are the ones that determine the rights of the companies that are building those dams, that are building transmission lines, the rights of the government, how government is going to benefit. If you mess up at that level, the electricity that you are going to bring to Umeme is almost at the end. Yes, Umeme has its own
there's a profit factor.
Big problems.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, who negotiated Umeme concession? Which the president was saying actually it was too much.
Too much, yes.
You allow Umeme that they are going to recover power losses of around 36%. You say Umeme you are going to get a return on investment of 19%. Who negotiated it? And the government officials who negotiated, some of them are ministers right now. And then on the other side, you say the president is complaining. So you discover that actually Umeme is not a problem. If we as a government were very transparent, and we said power in Uganda is going to be for ABCD purposes. First and foremost, we must ensure that each and every village in Uganda get this power. But they are going to get this power not just at the same time. We are going to have a plan. If there are some local areas that have specific economic advantages, we are going to begin with those ones. And ensure that actually we work with those villages, with those communities, with those districts to actually spur the economic activities in those places. As we increase our revenues, as we increase our economic activities, the economic growth continues growing, we would actually expand to other areas. And our objective of going to those other areas, we know they cannot manage to pay for power. Do we need to charge them VAT? Do we need to charge them service fee? If you are poor, because when you are poor, you find you cannot even pay for school fees for your child. You cannot actually even buy food for yourself when there is a problem.
Yes.
You cannot actually say there is a river passing here, let me pump water and irrigate my garden. So you find the government takes the obligation. So if I give them power and I advise them on how they can use that power to increase their economic activities, I tell you it is far much better than taking power there and you don't care. You as a government, you say by coincidence, since I have taken power there, it is no longer my responsibility to ensure that actually these people use power. My responsibility.
And what are they using that power for?
Yes, but because you know most of the government objective is actually politics. They know poor people normally have, they may not actually analyze. When you put poors even in a certain village, people actually be happy for some time.
Excitement.
Yes, when there is 2 rights in the entire town, people will say,
we have power.
We have power.
Yes.
They don't care whether that power is actually, but if they cared to understand that actually this power to reach here, this was the cost. And this cost meant that actually I'm not going to get clean water. I'm not going to find medicine in the hospitals. I'm not going to take my child to the right school and get the right education. This power that I'm seeing here, which is actually not even impacting on me, is actually going to impact on my child, or my son, my daughter, where I have struggled to sell my land, sell my cows, to take him or her to a university, finishes the university, 3, 4, 5, 6 down the years, that person has no job. And there are these people that actually we are saying now they are being actually traded as slaves in the Middle East.
Libya,
Because they imagine, if you don't have a job, you finish your degree, you don't have a job for 6 years. And you know, like the way like in Uganda here, your parents, your relatives, the neighbors, when they see you are at the university, they're expecting a lot.
Yes.
Because they have been contributing. So reach there, finish the university, and then you don't get a job. You even fear going back. Here in town, you don't have where to hide, you don't have a house, you don't have money for rent, you don't have food.
And I remember even
So
when there were
what do you do?
communities that had those small skills where the boys in the neighborhood would learn how to be barbers, to cut hair, those machines to sustain its electricity, you know, so things like that, even these small skills that could use electricity. I like the point that you're making. I know we have about 2 minutes to wind this up. If you can give us your parting shot, and if you can fix it in those 2 minutes, you said you should consider rural women in development of energy. If you can also hint on that in our last minutes as you also give us your
I think for
parting
me,
shot.
what I would do, I would tell government is that actually all of us will want electricity.
Yes.
But what is very important is to ensure we package the electricity development initiatives in a manner that we go to people, we understand what they need, we understand how the electricity can actually transform them, and we ensure that everywhere, whether we are going to build a dam, there is also some money to help the communities to benefit from that dam.
Yes.
Where you put a transmission line, you assess what is that power that you are taking going to help the people, how is it going to be relevant. You work with the people
What
to
are their
actually
needs in their
embrace,
communities? Yes.
that power. But most importantly, we need to ensure that our institutions work. If there are these electricity institutions, we must be auditing them every after 1 year or 2
Transparency,
years.
accountability
Yes.
to us,
If we
the
don't,
Ugandans.
and the last appeal is to the president.
Okay.
As long as the president continues to think that because he's a president, he is knowledgeable on each and everything, as long as he continues to undermine some of these institutions, it is not going to help. It doesn't matter, and you just wait. I'm very sure the next crisis that will be in Uganda is the coming on the grid of Karuma and Isimba. And don't get surprised when that power comes on the grid and the power tariffs go up because the power is not consumed and you have to pay for it. They will be telling us, you know, you have to give us 5 years because people are not consuming power. But you constructed the dams well knowing that they were what? There was no market.
Yes.
And there is no way you are going actually to get a market from people who you are squeezing to get money to go and pay a debt that where you got money to invest in projects that are not benefiting people. It is two-way traffic. So for me, I believe that, you know, what matters most is to make sure the institutions are working, to make sure that the president actually supports those institutions and stops undermining them. We have very, very experienced people in those ministries, in those institutions.
Let them do their job.
Let them do their job.
I hear
and
you.
ensure put high standards that those who fail to do their job, there is real punishment.
Yes.
And real-time punishment, not where you go to investigate and it takes 10 years. Without doing that,
I also said, Dickens, that it's important for us to show that when our leaders are accountable, telling them to step down from their job is not punishment enough, to be honest.
It is not.
Telling someone to resign.
You see, they resign when they have already made
They're happy to resign.
And actually, they actually make it a point that, you know, there is a possibility I may be chased away. But
so let's
in
make
1
it quickly.
year, by the time I leave in 1 year, I should have made enough that I can go and feed the entire district.
Thank you so much. The CEO of the Africa Institute for Energy Governance, Dickens Kamsha's winding up here. Question your leaders about these energy policies. Don't just come at the end and wait for things to be served to you on the table. These are your communities. It's your country. Question, you know, as we purchase, you know, also as we enter contracts with these companies, you know, what do they mean? You know, Fiego is here to actually break that down for us. So question, make sure there's transparency and also accountability. I don't know if we have